Ahoy there, my children of the Force. Welcome to Star Wars Transmission's weekly Q&A. I'm your boy Dan, and we've got some excellent questions to dive into, so let's get right to it. For our first question, Solo Mancini asks, why was General Grievous so weak in Revenge of the Sith? This is an excellent question, and essentially the answer to that is George Lucas. In 2002, when George Lucas began thinking about Revenge of the Sith, thinking about the villain for that film, he conceived of General Grievous, and in his mind, he conceived Grievous as this powerful new villain for Revenge of the Sith, and specifically he envisioned Grievous as a cyborg droid general to reflect and foreshadow what was going to happen to Anakin by the end of the film. And leading up to Revenge of the Sith, so before that movie came out, Grievous made his first appearance in the now Legends Genndy Tartakovsky's 2003 Clone Wars animated series, which is a fan favorite show. However, in that animated series, his appearance took place before George Lucas actually finalized the concept for General Grievous and the character traits that he would take on in Revenge of the Sith. And according to Genndy Tartakovsky, Lucas initially pitched Grievous to him as this ruthless, totally capable Jedi killer. But then he later developed the character to be what George Lucas described as one of those old B serial villains. They do something dastardly, twirl their mustache, and then run off, right? So that's how George Lucas envisioned General Grievous was going to appear in Revenge of the Sith. And that's definitely what we see in Revenge of the Sith, as well as in the Clone Wars animated series, right? So to reconcile this contradiction, in the Legends Clone Wars series, we see Mace Windu use the Force. He crushes General Grievous's chest plate, which damages his internal organs and his lungs, providing that reason for his hacking, cough, and his weakened state in Revenge of the Sith. So that's why we get that scene in the Tartakovsky Clone Wars to help reconcile the differences in how he was going to appear in Revenge of the Sith. Now, in canon, the reason that Grievous has that persistent cough is due to the fact that after he had life-saving surgery, right? So in canon, Count Dooku, Sand Hill, Poggle the Lesser, they knew the potential of Grievous as an agent for the Separatists. So what they decided to do is, hey, let's sabotage Grievous's shuttle. He's going to have this terrible crash. We're going to turn him into basically almost a full cyborg, and we're going to make him become a Separatist agent. So that's what happens. They sabotage a ship as a way to save him. He had to have implants, and part of those implants, or some of those implants, I should say, wound up irritating his lungs. And that's why we see that he's got a cough in Revenge of the Sith in terms of the canon reason. Now, I have to say, I think I like the Legends reason more. I like the idea that during the Battle of Coruscant, Grievous wound up encountering Mace Windu. During the scrum, or during their encounter, Mace Windu has to use the Force, and he crushed Grievous's chest plate, which affected his lungs. I like the Legends explanation better. I think it's a cooler story. But with that said, if canon decides to, or I should say Lucasfilm decides to stick with, hey, it's his implants that irritated his lungs, which is why he's got that cough, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I think it's one of those scenarios where you could easily make a retcon to show the Battle of Coruscant and to potentially show Mace Windu crushing Grievous's lungs, because I think that the implants that affected Grievous's lungs, I think that's from like reference books. I'll have to double check. I can't remember with 100% certainty. I think it's in some like reference book guidebooks. And to me, anything that's in like a reference book or a guidebook, that is 100% fair game for a retcon. I would be totally cool with Lucasfilm coming out and saying, hey, we're going to retcon what we put in these reference books or these guidebooks about why Grievous has that cough. And instead, we're going to make, let's say it's a Tales of the Jedi episode where we get to see the Battle of Coruscant from Grievous's perspective, and we see him go down onto Coruscant, capture Palpatine, and then he encounters Mace Windu. That would be dope. That would be so awesome. And I think that's an easy way that Lucasfilm could go about bringing what we saw in the Tartakovsky Clone Wars into canon. But again, if not, I'm cool with it. It's not the end of the world to me. Michael Toms, welcome to the chat, my friend. Glad to see that you have joined us. So Michael says, Grievous cough is actually George Lucas's cough. Yes, the recording that we hear in Revenge of the Sith is actually George Lucas's cough run through like a bunch of different EQ effects to get that sound of his cough. What's cool too is I can't remember the voice actor's name off the top of my head now. The voice actor's name is evading me right now, but yeah, basically to get that effect, they ran his voice through like a bunch of EQ effects to get that design, that voice design or sound design, I should say, which is pretty sweet. All right, sticking with Grievous, I love that this is a Grievous heavy start to the Q&A. Love some Grievous. So Amir Razak asks, what if Grievous was Force sensitive? Oh boy, hot damn. If Grievous was Force sensitive, Shiza, look out. Because man, if our boy was Force sensitive, he would be insanely powerful. I've mentioned this before, and I've actually done some live streams of me playing Battlefront. I played Battlefront for a while. And when you're playing PvP in Battlefront and someone plays as Grievous, it was terrifying to have Grievous come and attack you, especially when he does, I can't remember what the ability is called in Battlefront, but when he does that like spider crawl, holy crap, every time I'd be like, oh my God, I need to get the hell away from Grievous. This is absolutely terrifying, and it's a video game, and I cannot even imagine what encountering Grievous would be like in real life. Now imagine that, but a Force-sensitive General Grievous. Holy shitballs. Now, as a non-Force-sensitive cyborg, Grievous would become one of the most proficient and feared Jedi hunters during the Clone Wars. During his day, he was feared, and which is why we see that he has that hefty collection of lightsabers, right? The meme that we got about another addition to his lightsaber collection, but also the trophies that we saw he had in the season 1 episode of, what is it called? Grievous's Lair of the Clone Wars, right? We see he's got a collection of trophies and lightsaber hilts from Jedi that he killed. You don't get that moniker, Jedi Hunter, Jedi Killer, if you're not a legit Jedi Hunter and a Jedi Killer, right? So I think that even with lungs that were constantly irritated or constantly compromised, right? And any other deficiencies that he might have had from his cybernetics, which were minimal, but still he had some deficiencies, especially with his lungs, a Force-sensitive Grievous would have beat a large number of Jedi and could have been a viable option to Sidious as a Sith apprentice, especially when you factor in not only is this dude a beast, right, but he harbored such a disdain for the Jedi. So you figure that is absolutely the kind of apprentice that Sidious would want, right? I mean, think about Maul. Maul was a vicious fighter and a tactician with a lightsaber, and he absolutely hated the Jedi. General Grievous, same thing. He had such a disdain and hatred for the Jedi. Now imagine with his abilities as a non-Force sensitive, now imagine what they would be like if he was Force sensitive, right? Those skills, those abilities would be magnified, multiplied in terms of what he would be able to do and what would be able to accomplish. I'm torn on whether or not I think a Force sensitive Grievous could beat Dooku in a duel. I'm inclined to say no, but I think it would be close because remember, during his day, Dooku was one of the galaxy's best duelists. So a Force-sensitive Grievous, while he was trained by Dooku in the Jedi arts, I don't know if he could beat Dooku, but it would potentially be a close duel, right? I don't think with 100% certainty there's no way in hell a Force-sensitive Grievous could defeat Darth Vader. No way in hell. Because Darth Vader is an excellent duelist himself. He's super strong in the Force. So I don't think a Force-sensitive Grievous, even if, let's say, he were to go on and beat Dooku, I don't think that there's a chance he beats Darth Vader. But you could potentially make the case that he could at least beat Dooku. The other possibility is that a Force-sensitive Grievous could have been on Darth Sidious's radar as a potential apprentice, right? So as I mentioned earlier, to bring Grievous into the Separatist fold, to make him an agent of the Separatist, Dooku, Poggle the Lesser, Sandhill, they conspired, sabotaged Grievous's shuttle, right? If, let's say, Grievous was on Darth Sidious's radar as a potential apprentice, because Grievous was Force sensitive, maybe then Dooku and company don't sabotage his shuttle and Grievous doesn't need to have life-saving surgery, right? So now we've got a pretty organic being, if not fully organic being, who is Force sensitive. You could make the argument that, hey, maybe he makes some cybernetic upgrades, because even before he had life-saving surgery, he still opted to get some cybernetic upgrades. So maybe even if he doesn't have to have that life-saving surgery, he still opts to have some cybernetic upgrades, but maybe he doesn't get those, or maybe he doesn't get anywhere near what he originally received, and we get a completely different looking General Grievous or Grievous in Revenge of the Sith, Darth Grievous. That's such a baller ass name, Darth Grievous. I don't know why when I was thinking about this question, it never once occurred to me, but hey, his name would be Darth Grievous, but that's such a sick name, Darth Grievous, right? A completely organic and Force sensitive Grievous would become a huge asset to Sidious. And again, he could potentially choose Grievous over Count Dooku as an apprentice. I could totally see that. In this situation, maybe Dooku doesn't become Sidious's apprentice, because at this point, Sidious winds up focusing on Darth Grievous after Maul's death. And Dooku doesn't wind up leaving the Jedi Order. Maybe he still does leave the Jedi Order. That could be a possibility. I could see either scenario, or even if Dooku became Sidious's apprentice, maybe Sidious pivots from Dooku to Grievous, right? Dooku is Sidious's apprentice. Then Sidious learns about Grievous and his potential and pivots and decides, hey, I'm going to cast Dooku aside, and I'm gonna pick up this acquisition of Grievous as my new Sith apprentice until Anakin is ready to become my next apprentice. I could definitely see that. The only hiccup I see in that scenario is we have to remember that Dooku trained his entire life as a Jedi, and in the Jedi arts, and in dueling, and in mastering the Force. And while Grievous was a warlord and a feared warlord and warrior, even if he was Force sensitive, he probably is not able to learn the Jedi arts and learn how to master the Force until he's older, until when he starts becoming on Darth Sidious's radar, probably later on in life. Whereas again, Dooku got to train his entire life to be a Jedi. So even if Grievous were Force sensitive, I could see a scenario where Dooku is still Darth Sidious's apprentice, but then maybe Grievous becomes a Sith assassin for Dooku and Darth Sidious, because we know those two, they loved having their Sith assassins, right? Asajj, in Legends, not so much in canon, but in Legends, Maul was a Sith assassin trained by Darth Sidious, right? And they really, with Sidious, he didn't really follow the rule of two. In some ways he did, in other ways he couldn't have cared about the rule of two. So I think a likely scenario with a Force sensitive Grievous is that Dooku is still Sidious's apprentice because of the fact that he trained his entire life as a Jedi and would have been very strong in the Force, probably more strong than Grievous, right? So they take Grievous as a Sith assassin, and he could potentially be someone that maybe still heads the Separatist army, or he serves a function like Asajj Ventress, and maybe Asajj Ventress isn't a part of the picture, or maybe she is and she shares part of that, her position with Grievous maybe, or maybe she gets thrusted aside and then Grievous takes her position. But either way, I could see a scenario where Dooku is still Sidious's apprentice and Grievous becomes a Sith assassin for them. Now, here's where it could be interesting, because how would Grievous and Obi-Wan's duel play out on Utapau? If Grievous has Force capabilities and he's Force sensitive, and he gets to train with Dooku and or Darth Sidious to utilize the Force, how does his duel with Obi-Wan play out? You could make the argument that, hey, he winds up beating Obi-Wan on Mustafar, or excuse me, on Utapau, right? He winds up beating Obi-Wan on Utapau, but then let's say he's got to fight Anakin on Mustafar instead. I don't think in that scenario, as I mentioned earlier, I shouldn't say Anakin, Darth Vader. I don't think Grievous can defeat Darth Vader. To me, there's just no way a Force sensitive Grievous can beat Darth Vader. If Dooku can't beat Darth Vader, I don't think Grievous could. But I think you could make the argument that Grievous may be able to beat Obi-Wan, but I feel like that could be unlikely. That would be a little bit of a stretch, but there's an argument to be made that, hey, Grievous as a non-Force sensitive kind of gave Obi-Wan a run for his money. Now imagine if he's Force sensitive. How would that play out in that scenario? So again, I think the likely scenario is that Grievous would be a Sith assassin for Dooku and Sidious. He would have killed way more Jedi, so many more Jedi than what he already accomplished in the Clone Wars and by the time of Revenge of the Sith. I still think Darth Vader would beat Grievous, and I think Vader would be a better option for Sidious. But again, maybe Grievous beats Obi-Wan on Utapau, which then that means, hey, Anakin doesn't have to face Obi-Wan on Mustafar. Maybe Anakin then is, other than the hand that he lost to Dooku in Attack of the Clones, pretty much organic at that point. Maybe Padme doesn't die, because again, the whole reason why Anakin loses his shit with Padme on Mustafar is because she unwittingly brought Obi-Wan to him. If Obi-Wan's dead at that point, maybe she travels to Mustafar, and she still would not be cool with what Anakin is doing, but maybe things turn out differently for those two, or at least for Padme. And then in that situation, maybe she gets to raise Luke and Leia, and who knows what happens with them, right? But that also has huge implications for the galaxy, right? There's a lot of what ifs, and there's a lot of different scenarios. The likeliest scenario to me is Grievous is going to be an assassin for Sidious and Dooku, and then eventually Darth Vader. And then once Order 66 happens, you could potentially see Sidious saying, "Hey, we're getting rid of Grievous. This guy is too powerful. We don't want him to potentially be a obstacle that we have to deal with." Or they could say, "Hey, we've executed Order 66. We know we've killed a large number of Jedi, but we know that there's still a good number of Jedi out there. Let's use Grievous. Let's have him be the Grand Inquisitor or be a part of the Inquisitorius. And now he's helping Darth Vader and the Inquisitors track down remaining Jedi." How badass would that be? I love this question because it started taking me down this whole scenario of where could Grievous be towards the end of Revenge of the Sith and onward. And I think there's a lot of possibilities. Having Grievous be Force sensitive would have been dope in Revenge of the Sith, because I still think you could have had a scenario play out where Grievous is still a cog in the machine for Darth Sidious. Obviously, it didn't play out that way. He still is absolutely terrifying. Like I said, in Battlefront 2, when I would have to face Grievous, like, oh god, this is terrifying, and I'm just playing a freaking video game. Imagine Force-sensitive Grievous. He'd be utterly frightening. Be absolutely horrifying. Great question. All right, let me catch up with the chat quickly. How about Genndy Tartakovsky's version of Grievous? So we touched on that earlier, and I mentioned I liked the reason why there's such a difference between how Grievous appears in Tartakovsky's Clone Wars and in the canon Clone Wars and in Revenge of the Sith is essentially because George Lucas hadn't finalized how he wanted Grievous to appear yet. I like the idea that Mace Windu crushes Grievous's lungs. I think that would be cool to bring in canon. But yeah, I like, the Genndy Tartakovsky micro series, whatever it's called. Even though it's Legends, it still is super fun. It's got some really cool moments. Apparently, I was watching Star Wars Explains most recent Q&A, and the dude Alex was saying, because we just got the announcement for Volume 2 of Visions, one of the studios that's going to be doing a short in Volume 2 of Visions, I think they were one of the animators responsible for Tartakovsky, or they worked with Tartakovsky. I can't remember exactly what it was, but hey, Alex was talking about we may see a Tartakovsky style story in Visions Volume 2, which would be so dope because that Legends series is really fun. It's got some cool stories, and I still think that there's a way that you could bring those stories into canon. I mean, the Brotherhood author Mike Chen, even though in that novel Anakin and Obi-Wan encounter Asajj Ventress for the first time in that novel. However, I did a short on this. The author, Mike Chen, he basically made it in the book appear that, hey, there's the possibility that the duel that we saw Anakin and Asajj have on Yavin 4 could still have happened. It could still be potentially a canon duel. So that would be dope. I think that there is still a way that you could bring some of those stories into canon, which would be a lot of fun. Because like I said, I did really enjoy that micro series. There's some really cool moments, and I do really like the animation style as well. It's a lot of fun. All right, let's move on to our next question. So this comes from Wild Wookie Dog. What a name. Asks, if Darth Vader could use Force Lightning, do you think he'd primarily use Force Lightning as opposed to a lightsaber like Sidious, or do you think he would use it like Dooku, where he'd use a combination of both during a duel? So in Charles Soule's Darth Vader comic, which is like one of my absolute favorite canon comics, it's so spectacular. It's so good. I cannot recommend it enough. in that comic, we get to see Vader, or like his Force spirit, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, use red Force lightning on a vision of Darth Sidious. It's so dope. So if you haven't seen, or if you haven't read that comic, it's excellent. Darth Vader in the comic, he's building his castle on Mustafar. He, through a Sith helmet, it possesses a bunch of different people. The spirit of that Sith, Darth Momin, helps Vader design his castle, which you say, when I'm saying, I'm like, it sounds so kooky, but it's excellent. And the castle winds up opening a door to the dark side, and Vader, he's able to go into that portal to the dark side, and we see his spirit, Force spirit, so to speak, take this like vision quest almost. And in it, that's where we get to see him use red Force lightning. It's so dope. I cannot recommend that series enough. It is spectacular. It's by my boy Charles Soule, as I mentioned. Great author. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. You could probably, I wouldn't be shocked if you could take that comic out from your local library. It's dope. All right. In any event, I think that if Vader could use Force lightning, he would probably wind up utilizing it in a similar way that we see Dooku utilize it. Because again, they're both trained Jedi, right? They grew up as Jedi. They trained to fight with lightsabers, to duel with lightsabers. They are excellent duelists. They have a lot of experience utilizing lightsabers. So I think that just like how Count Dooku uses his Force lightning, I think that Anakin would probably utilize it in a very similar way. I think he would most likely still duel someone using his lightsaber, but would only use Force lightning in moments where he felt like, hey, this person is really giving me a run for my money. I need to get the upper hand here, or I could potentially lose this duel. I'm gonna blast some Force lightning at them. Or if he felt like, hey, this person is an absolute jabroni, I'm gonna quickly dispose of them with some Force lightning. I think that would be how Vader would utilize it. You know, so essentially, if he thinks he can make quick work of someone, or if he felt like, I need to use it, I got to get the upper hand on this person that I'm dueling. In canon, Anakin loves a challenge. I thought this was so dope when I read this. Despite having an exceptionally strong connection to the Force as a Jedi, he tended not to use the Force very often during lightsaber duels, and would instead focus on the physical combat aspects of combat, even when facing opponents who would liberally use the Force in duels, such as Count Dooku, which is just so dope. So essentially, Anakin was like, yo, I want to be the most baller martial artist in the Jedi Order and be the most baller lightsaber duelist. I am not going to use the Force unless I have to, even when I'm dueling against someone like Count Dooku, who's going to be using the Force liberally to enhance his fighting and his abilities. That is just so dope to me. I thought that was so cool when I read that. Another example of Anakin liking a challenge comes from that Charles Soule Darth Vader comic that I mentioned earlier. So in that comic, I can't remember if we know the exact year it is. Is it maybe like, I think it's somewhere between 10 and 5 BBY. I can't remember the exact year. At that point, Vader had felt like, hey, there might be some straggler Jedi still alive. We know that Obi-Wan's still around, maybe some others, but for the most part, myself and the Inquisitorius, we have like wiped the Jedi out. I have no one to challenge me anymore. I have no one to test my abilities on. I have no one to keep my skills sharp, my martial skills and abilities sharp. So what does he do? He tells Tarkin, bro, I want you to hunt me. And so Tarkin agrees to it. And Tarkin gets a bunch of like bounty hunters and mercenaries. They go to this planet, Chandar's Folly. And Tarkin and these bounty hunters and mercenaries hunt Vader. And one by one, he starts killing them off until it's just Tarkin and Vader at the end. And Tarkin almost gets Vader. Obviously, we know that he doesn't. But still, I mean, could you imagine being like black belt, absolute baller ass martial artist and being like, yo, I just want, come at me. However many people come at me to keep my skills sharp because no one can challenge me. I'm a goddamn shark amongst little clownfish. Like, that's how Vader felt. So I say this because I think Vader would want a challenge, just like Anakin, wanted a challenge. I think Vader would want a challenge. And even if he could use Force lightning, I think he would still duel with his lightsaber and probably utilize it the way we see Dooku utilize it, as opposed to Darth Sidious. I just think Darth Vader, Anakin, their personality was very much about being a strong combatant, being a badass lightsaber duelist, a badass martial artist. That was his style and his MO. So I think Vader would probably use Force lightning similar to how Count Dooku utilized Force lightning. All right, so let's see. Bull Run, my boy, what's going on? Glad to see that you're joining us. Star Wars Documented, glad to see you're here. If Star Wars Documented asks if Qui-Gon Jinn was primarily a Form 3 or Form 5 lightsaber duelist, do you think he could have won the duel with Darth Maul? Oh my God. Did Darth Maul use? I think Darth Maul used Form 4. I don't know what lightsaber style Qui-Gon used. I'd have to look that up and see if he used maybe a style similar to Obi-Wan. I wonder if he used Form 3. So Obi-Wan uses Form 3, which is very much a defensive lightsaber form. I don't know what form Qui-Gon uses off the top of my head. I have to look that up, but I feel like Form 3, which obviously we see Obi-Wan beat Darth Maul, he beats Darth Vader on multiple occasions. Form 3 is, to me, an underrated form. I love sports, and in a lot of sports, having a top tier defense usually leads to success on whatever sport it is. Not always, but usually. I like the idea of I'm going to play defensively and try to pick apart my opponent and try to find weaknesses when I can. So I think Form 3 would be a great form to utilize against Form 4, which is very much that like acrobatic style of lightsaber combat. We see Ahsoka Tano is a practitioner of Form 4. Yoda is a practitioner of Form 4. I believe Yaddle is a practitioner of Form 4. Maul is a practitioner of Form 4. So it's that very like chaotic, acrobatic style of lightsaber duels, fighting, excuse me. So I especially against that style of lightsaber combat, I feel like Form 3 would be an excellent form to utilize against someone who's using Form 4. That's a good question. All right, moving on. Viper76PL asks, favorite Imperial ship? So without question, my favorite ship, the design that I love, is the Executor. It is such a dope looking ship. Love that this ship looks like an arrowhead. And I know these Star Destroyers, they look like arrowheads, but the Executor really looks sleek and looks like an arrowhead. And I love that it's got the black in the middle. It's outlined, so to speak, with the gray. It's just so sleek. It is so foreboding. I love the design of the Executor. Could you imagine if Star Destroyers were a real thing? You look up into the sky and you see the damn Executor in your planet's orbit. How terrifying that would be. It would be absolutely frightening. And that's the whole point, right, of a Star Destroyer. They're supposed to be intimidating. They're supposed to pack a powerful punch, which they did. It's just such a dope looking ship. I love when we get to see it for the first time in Empire Strikes Back. I remember like when I realized that was Darth Vader's ship when I was younger, I was like, oh my God, that's probably also why I love it too. When I was younger and I realized that that was Darth Vader's starship, I was like, oh my God, this thing is incredible. So yeah, for me, it was like, without a question, the Executor is my favorite ship. Another cool ship, I'm just thinking about this now. Carrion Spike is pretty cool. That's Tarkin's ship. We see Anakin use and the clones utilize the Carrion Spike in the Clone Wars. It's got a lot of cool capabilities, cloaking capabilities, and it was a deadly starship. So that's a cool one as well. I love like some of the like Sith, or excuse me, not Sith, like TIE. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on some of the variants, what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. Some of like the TIE, like Enforcer starships, are just that were meant more for like speed and attack. Those are pretty sweet, but Executor, hands down, is going to be my favorite Imperial ship. The other thing that I think is great is the name Executor. It's a perfect name for Darth Vader and the character and what we see of Darth Vader in Star Wars. So the definition of Executor, let me read that to you guys. It's a person or institution appointed to carry out the terms of someone's will. That is exactly what Vader is doing for Sidious, right? He's carrying out Sidious's wishes as his Sith apprentice. So that name Executor, I think, is just perfect for that ship. I think it is also, it just sounds dope, Executor. So yeah, without question, the Executor is going to be my favorite Imperial ship. It's just baller. Moving on, had to pick this question. Emperor Valkorion asks, would you consider joining the Eternal Empire? Sorry, bro. Like my father, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. I almost messed up that quote. Plus, when I would play SWTOR, because Emperor Valkorion appears in SWTOR, Star Wars The Old Republic, I would pretty much play almost exclusively as a Jedi or a gunslinger. Towards the end of my run playing SWTOR, I started rocking some Sith, but primarily I was playing as a Jedi. I was playing as a gunslinger. So I'm a Jedi, bro. I've mentioned that before. I'm a Jedi. So later, Valkorion, you Sith spawn SOB. All right, next up. Was Darth Plagueis, well, let me actually read my boy's name. Nick Werner asks, was Darth Plagueis secretly in the Phantom Menace? It's a great question because I see this pop up a bunch. And no, Darth Plagueis was not in the Phantom Menace. Not even in Legends was Darth Plagueis in Phantom Menace. So wherever, if you hear people saying Plagueis is in the Phantom Menace, he is not in the Phantom Menace. However, in the Darth Plagueis novel, the Legends novel, which I've mentioned this in multiple live streams, I freaking love that novel so much. It's excellent. In that novel, we get to see Plagueis and Sidious working behind the scenes during the events of the Phantom Menace. We are seeing I think it's towards the end of does it start in the middle of the Darth Plagueis novel or towards the end? I can't remember. But at some point in that novel, we start to see events that are taking place in the Phantom Menace are starting to happen in the book. So like for instance, in the Darth Plagueis novel, Plagueis and Sidious are talking about how Anakin has been discovered by the Jedi. And they are another thing that's commonly misconstrued that I see people throwing around on the internet is that, oh, Darth Sidious was Anakin's father in Legends. Not the case at all. In the Darth Plagueis novel, essentially what happens is that Plagueis and Sidious are talking about Anakin, and they're like, bro, hey, when about a decade earlier, we were pouring dark side malevolence and dark power into the galaxy, trying to get basically the Force to fight back against the light. They wanted the dark side to basically consume the galaxy. they thought that at that point, the Force had basically fought back, leading to the birth of Anakin. So even in Legends, in the Darth Plagueis novel, at no point is it ever mentioned that Plagueis and or Sidious was Anakin's father. At no point. Just like at no point is Darth Plagueis in the Phantom Menace. Now, in the Darth Plagueis novel, we get to see Darth Sidious kill Plagueis. And that happens the night before Palpatine is elected Chancellor of the Republic. So, you know, in the Phantom Menace, right, the vote of no confidence for Chancellor Valorum, and that leads to an election. Palpatine is elected as Chancellor of the Republic. The very night before, Plagueis and Sidious, they're essentially celebrating. They know Sidious is going to be elected Chancellor. So they're celebrating. During that celebration, Plagueis gets drunk. Sidious winds up killing him. So it happens during the events of the Phantom Menace, but at no point does Plagueis appear in that movie. Now, that's in Legends, all right? So same thing in canon. Plagueis does not appear in the Phantom Menace. It's not entirely clear as to when Plagueis died in canon. I think that is being done purposely, because I would not be surprised if Lucasfilm is holding on to Darth Plagueis in their back pocket. I don't know. I could be pulling stuff out of thin air here, but I am such a fan of Darth Plagueis. I'm such a fan of the Darth Plagueis novel. And I think Lucasfilm is holding on to Plagueis in their back pocket to say, hey, when we know the story is going to be just right, that's when we're going to start diving into Plagueis more. Because we've gotten some little nuggets here and there about Plagueis, but not a lot. So in canon, we don't know when Plagueis died. There is no date as to when Plagueis died. All we know that by 32 BBY, which is when the Phantom Menace takes place, at that point, he is dead. And the reason that we know that he is dead by that point is because in the film, The Phantom Menace, Sidious is the Sith Master, Darth Maul is the Sith Apprentice. Thus, for Sidious to be the Master and for Darth Maul to be the Sith Apprentice, Plagueis would have had to have been ousted before that. So, in canon, his death would have come sometime before 32 BBY. Now, I like the idea. I love the Plagueis novel, and I like the idea that, hey, he and Sidious were still working together during the events of the Phantom Menace. Like when I read the Plagueis novel for the first time, and I had no clue that parts of that story were going to overlap with the Phantom Menace. And once I started to see that, I was like, yo, holy crap, this is dope as hell. So I would love if we started to see Lucasfilm maybe starting to pull more of what we got in Plagueis into canon. I could understand why Lucasfilm hasn't yet, because there is a lot of baggage, so to speak, with Darth Plagueis, because so many people they've got a lot of love for that Plagueis novel, and people are very much like, you know, I've been really enjoying The Last of Us. I've been loving it, and it's spectacular. And even though it seems to be almost universally praised, the few negative critiques I see about it is people that played the game. I have not played the game, complaining about certain things being different in the show from the game. And that to me is like, come on, bro. Even if I played the game, the story is spectacular in the show. And they're two different things, and they could be different. And I say that because I think if Lucasfilm started to introduce Plagueis more, and what we're seeing taking place differs from the Darth Plagueis novel, people would absolutely lose their mind and go berserk. So I think for that reason, I understand why Lucasfilm hasn't dove into Plagueis all that much yet, but I also think that they're keeping him in their back pocket. Would not shock me in the least if we see during the Acolyte that Plagueis is around. Because I'm trying to remember the exact year that the Acolyte is going to take place. I can't remember. Did any of you guys watching, do you know when the Acolyte is going to take place, the year, BBY? I think it's like 50 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. So you could totally have a scenario where maybe Darth Tenebrous, Sidious, not Sidious, Plagueis' master, maybe at that point he's the Sith master in that story, and then we get to see Plagueis become into the picture and become Tenebrous' master, or maybe Plagueis is the master at that point. I would love that. I have said this before when we got that announcement from Disney and Lucasfilm about, hey, here's all that content we're going to be releasing in the next several years. It was during Disney Plus Day 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I can't remember exactly when it was. We got all the announcements for Ahsoka, for Andor, for Visions, Lando series. I'm trying to think what else. But the thing that I was like, oh my God, I'm the most excited about, if I could, I don't want to say I couldn't care less. If I had to pick one of those to be made and the rest of these get shit canned, 100% it was the Acolyte. That was the one I was the most excited about, and still the project I'm the most excited about, because I love learning about the Sith, and the concept of that show that we've been getting some nuggets of information about the show dropping. It sounds so damn sick. So yeah, I could totally see a scenario where we get like Tenebrous, we get Plagueis, we may get to see a young Darth Sidious. Like, absolutely dope. I'm so here for it. And I think that would be a great opportunity for Lucasfilm to say, hey, let's start dipping our toes in the Plagueis pool, and maybe we can start putting together some books. Maybe we could start putting together some comics. I could definitely see that happening, especially if we see him appear in live action. That would be incredible. But yeah, so to answer the question, was Plagueis secretly in the Phantom Menace? No. In Legends, he was still alive during that 32 BBY by that point, and he winds up being killed by Sidious in 32 BBY the night before Sidious is elected Chancellor. In canon, we have no clue when exactly he did die, just that he was dead by the time of the Phantom Menace. All right. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be going through. I do this too often. I get sucked into a conversation, and then I completely forget to show you guys the images that I came across. This image is so dope. Someone made a mod for Battlefront, and you could play as Plagueis. I saw some people play as Darth Bane, the canon version design of Darth Bane, and I love this when I saw it. I was like, yo, so dope. Gotta get a screenshot of that. All right. So for our last question, you know what? Hold on. Before we go to our last question, let me just check. Let me check the chat for a second here. Bullrun asks when the Acolyte is coming out. I think the Acolyte is coming out. I think the Acolyte is coming out this year. I think it's coming out in the end of 2023. Not 100% sure on that, but I'm pretty sure it's coming out the end of 2023. I think is Ahsoka coming out in 2023 as well? Dude, I'm pretty sure this year is going to be absolutely bonkers for Star Wars stories. Right now we're getting the Bad Batch. We're getting Mando season 3 on a day after my birthday. Guys, it kills me that I was born on May 3rd and not May 4th. Like, my mom couldn't have waited 24 hours to freaking give birth to me. But anyway, May 4th, we're getting volume 2 of Visions. I don't know what we've got for summer, but then at some point, Ahsoka's dropping, so I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see Ahsoka drop maybe towards like the beginning of summer or around when Andor dropped, and then maybe the Acolyte is going to follow at like the end of 2023, beginning of 2024. That would be so dope. All right, moving on. For our last question, my boy Ozzy Star Wars Nerd, who I see in the chat. Welcome, Ozzy Star Wars Nerd. Glad you're here. Had to answer your question because I thought this was great, especially because it's about my boy Commander Cody. How did Cody get the scar above his eye? So at this time, there is no canon explanation as to how Cody got that scar near his eye. So we don't know exactly what happened to cause him to get that scar. There's so many possibilities, but I'm going to guess that my man got that scar trying to save someone's life or another being's life. That just to me seems like Cody, right? Cody, I know he participated in Order 66, but what we've gotten from Cody in the Clone Wars, now in the Bad Batch, he's a very honorable and caring clone. And to me, it seems like it would be very on brand for Cody to risk his life to try to save another clone or another being, and in that process, get injured, resulting in that scar. I think that would be great. I mean, it could literally be something as simple as, during such and such battle, a bomb went off, a thermal detonator went off, and some shrapnel caught him in the face, and that's why he has that scar. But I think a lot of fans would appreciate and enjoy a story where Cody is in some sort of battle during the Clone Wars, and during that fight, he winds up putting his life on the line to save one of his fellow clones, and in the resulting scrum, he gets that scar by his eye. I think that would be really cool, and I think a lot of fans would really like that. And that could be another situation where, hey, you could literally throw that into, we know there's going to be more Tales of the Jedi coming out again in the future. So, hey, let's make a Tales of the Jedi episode where we've got Commander Cody and Obi-Wan fighting during the Clone Wars, and we see Commander Cody get that scar. That would be cool. You could also have a comic. There's so many possibilities. I mean, you could even, in the Bad Batch, if Cody continues to appear in the Bad Batch, you can make have a flashback or something. There's a lot of different ways that they could show Cody getting that scar, and I think a lot of fans would appreciate knowing how Cody got that scar, because I know that there are others that want to know how Cody got that scar. So yeah, I'm going to say that Cody put his life on the line to protect someone, and that's how our boy got that scar. So those were some excellent questions, my friends. That's all I've got for questions, but before we dip out of here, let me peep the chat here. So let's see. So Anthony, Anthony Lenzen asks, can you talk about Commander Carbon from the comics who based his cybernetics after Grievous? Oh, that's a good question, my friend. Let me see if I could quickly find an image to show you guys of who Carbon is. So what Anthony is talking about is from the 2015 Darth Vader comic series. In that comic series, a scientist named Silo, he's the guy that created Darth Vader's armor in canon. So this Imperial scientist, he basically, after the Death Star is destroyed, like almost immediately after that, Vader's in the hot seat with Sidious. So Silo basically goes to Sidious and says, hey, I can create for you someone to replace Darth Vader. Put Vader in like a ceremonial position. Let me create for you a being that will be force sensitive. If not, let me take that back. There are twins that are force sensitive, but I don't think all of his like subjects are force sensitive. But essentially, he created these insane like beings to be potential replacements for Darth Vader, so that again, Vader would be put into a ceremonial role, and then Darth Sidious would have his new apprentice. So let me see. I think I got some images, maybe not. I can't find anything quickly. But yeah, so Carbon is this Mon Calamari. He fought in the Clone Wars. His body was all jacked up. And so Silo created this basically like a body, cyborg body, just like General Grievous. So very similar. He's pretty baller. Silo is like one of those storylines, and his storyline with Darth Sidious in the Darth Vader comic. It's one of those things where I'm like, I love this. One of the things that I love about Star Wars comics is like they could get weird with it. They can get weird with it in the stories, and that Darth Vader comic is one of those scenarios where they kind of get a little weird with it with the storyline, and Carbon is dope. There's like these Force sensitive twins that have augmented capabilities that are pretty cool. There's this like, trying to remember, I can't remember the guy's name, but it's this like being that has like AI implanted in him. So he can basically access a bunch of different like remote technology. It's totally sweet. I would definitely recommend that comic. The only negative critique I have about that comic, I don't know why, during the early Lucasfilm, Disney acquisition, I should say, of Lucasfilm, the comics, the art style during that like 3 year period wasn't my favorite. So that's the only negative critique I have about the comic. Sometimes I wasn't the biggest fan of the art of that comic series, but otherwise, excellent comic. Would highly recommend it. And Carbon is pretty sweet, but of course he gets jacked up and smacked up by Darth Vader. So Aussie Star Wars Nerd says everything is tying into the sequels now. Bad Batch with Omega, possibly Mandalorian with Grogu. You know, I could see that. I mean, with some of the stuff we've gotten for like books, comics, I think Lucasfilm is trying to right, I don't want to say the wrongs. That's maybe not the best way I can say it. They're trying to maybe build on take care of some potential gaps in storytelling with the Clone Wars to enhance the story that we've gotten from the sequels. You know, I've mentioned this a bunch. I'm not the biggest sequel series fan, sequel trilogy fan. There are moments in it that are great, and there are moments in it that are not so great. But some of the stories that have come that build off of what we saw in the sequel series, I think have been very strong. Rise of Kylo Ren by Charles Soule has been very good. Shadow of the Sith, oh my God, fantastic canon novel, like one of my favorite Star Wars novels, not just canon, like Legends too. It is spectacular, and it builds on stuff from the sequel trilogy. Darth Vader comic series kind of builds on some of the stuff that we learned in the sequels. So yeah, I think Aussie Star Wars Nerd. Yeah, I think, you know, Lucasfilm, it's kind of like what George Lucas started to do with the prequels after they were released, with the Clone Wars, with comics and novels that came out, trying to build upon the story that he had crafted with the prequel trilogy. Same sort of thing with the sequel trilogy. Bullrun asks, do you think the Nile are connected to Darth Nihilus? That would be dope. That would be so cool. Like, I would love if they're like total simps for Darth Nihilus, and that's how they got the name the Nile. That would be really cool. I would be into that. Don't know though. Don't know. I'm bummed that I get Marvel. I have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited, which is dope because you could read like any Legends Star Wars comic that was even ones that weren't put out by Marvel. So like some of the Dark Horse stuff, as well as any canon comic, but I have to wait like 3 months after they've been released. Excuse me. So I say that because I love the High Republic. I've been loving the High Republic comic series, and I'm like 3 months behind, which stinks so much because I just finally got to start reading the first issue of phase 2 of the High Republic comic. And I can't recommend the High Republic comic enough. Cavan Scott is an excellent author. The first, the High Republic comic for phase 1 was spectacular, and it ended in such amazing fashion. But to go back to your question, Anthony, I'm going to say I don't think that the Nihil are named after Darth Nihilus, although I think that would be really cool if we find out that they are Sith. Because I've said this before. I'm hoping, I think it would be dope if we learn towards the end of the releases for the High Republic, like in phase 3 or 4. I think there's 4 phases. If we find out that, hey, the Sith were pulling the strings all along for the Nihil, and that, yeah, they were Sith simps and they were named after Darth Nihilus, that would be dope. I want to see Revan 2, Anthony. I think that would be cool. I know there was all that talk recently within the last couple months about the remake of the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic, being in trouble. But Revan would be a fun character to bring back into canon in a bigger way than we've already gotten him. Because right now he's just like, what is it? I think he's mentioned in a reference book for Rise of Skywalker because of the Revan Legion. I think that's it. So it would be cool to learn more about Darth Revan, because at this point in canon, he's only Darth Revan, not Revan the Jedi. It's just he's a Sith Lord in canon, no Jedi. So Revan would be another fun character to explore in canon. But I think that is where we're going to leave it off, guys. I missed last week for the Q&A. My schedule was a little herky-jerky last week, so I couldn't do the live stream. So I was so freaking excited to do the live stream today. The questions were great, and you guys have made this fun as hell. I love doing the live stream. I look forward to it every freaking week. So thank you guys so much for making this a ton of fun for me. Just last week, I released my first non-short video and non-live stream in like a year. And that was a ton of fun to work on and to release for you guys. I'm going to start releasing videos. I don't think it's going to be like every other day or multiple times a week. I just think my schedule is too crazy for me to be able to do that. But I'm going to be releasing videos. So it might be like one a week, maybe one every 2 weeks, something along those lines. But there are definitely going to be more videos that I'm going to be publishing for you guys. And then we're going to keep doing the live streams. We're going to keep doing the Q&A every week. We're going to keep doing breakdowns of the Bad Batch. And guys, we're like less than a month from Mandalorian. I cannot freaking wait. And once the Mandalorian drops, I may switch gears and just do live streams for Mando and not the Bad Batch. We'll have to see how that works out, because I think at this point they're still going to be released. The Bad Batch is going to be released on the same day as Mando, so we'll have to see. So make sure to keep your eyes peeled for videos that are coming, for live streams that drop every week, for shorts that I publish. A lot of stuff going on with Star Wars Transmissions, and I am super, super excited about that. If you have not, you jabroni, for whatever reason, like this video, subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions. Help the channel, help me keep making content for you guys, because I love doing this, and I love knowing that you guys enjoy my goofy ass talking about Star Wars. So like the video, subscribe. You can also follow us on TikTok at SW Transmissions. With that said, my friends, may the Force be with you, and stay nerdy.